I still remember the moment I realized something was wrong. Not because she yelled at me. Not because she left. But because one night, while I was talking about my day, she smiled, and looked completely emotionally gone at the same time. That confused me more than rejection ever could. I met Emily during one of the most ordinary periods of my life. I was 29, working in project management for a software company in Chicago, living in a small apartment that always smelled faintly like coffee and laundry detergent. My life was predictable in the safest possible way. Wake up. Work. Gym. Microwave dinner. Sleep. Then she showed up. She worked in marketing on the same floor. Quiet at first. Friendly, but careful. She had this habit of listening longer than most people. Not waiting to talk. Actually listening. At least that's what I thought. The first few months felt easy. Comfortable. We started grabbing coffee after work. Then dinners. Then weekends together. Nothing dramatic. No movie-style chemistry. Just a slow feeling that somehow made my routine feel less empty. And honestly, I liked that. I remember thinking, this is probably what mature relationships look like. No games. No chaos. But looking back now, I realize I misunderstood something important very early on. I thought comfort automatically meant connection. At first, Emily would tell me little things about herself. Stories about high school. Her relationship with her mother. Random insecurities she laughed about while pretending they didn't matter. Then slowly, she stopped. Not completely. Just enough that I didn't notice it immediately. That's the strange thing about emotional distance. It rarely arrives all at once. It happens in tiny moments people ignore because nothing technically seems wrong. She still texted me good morning. Still asked about work. Still sat next to me on the couch at night. But something underneath all of it started feeling strangely quiet. I remember one Friday evening specifically. We were eating takeout in my apartment while some Netflix documentary played in the background. I was talking about a conflict with my manager, explaining how frustrating it was. Halfway through my story, I noticed Emily nodding. But her eyes looked tired. Not physically tired. Emotionally tired. I stopped talking for a second and asked, "You okay?" She smiled immediately. "Yeah. Just thinking." I accepted that answer without questioning it. That became my pattern. Every time I sensed distance, I translated it into stress. Or exhaustion. Or mood swings. Anything except what it actually was. Because the truth felt uncomfortable. A few weeks later, something happened that stayed in my mind longer than it should have. We were walking through a bookstore downtown when Emily picked up a random psychology book. She flipped through a few pages, then laughed quietly. "What?" I asked. She showed me one sentence highlighted by a previous reader. "People stop expressing needs when they believe they won't be emotionally received anyway." I remember smirking a little. That sounds dramatic. She looked at me for maybe 2 seconds too long before putting the book back. "Maybe," she said. At the time, I didn't understand why that moment felt heavy. Now I do. The weird thing is, I genuinely believed I was a good boyfriend. I wasn't cheating. I wasn't controlling. I wasn't mean. But psychology doesn't only work through obvious bad behavior. Sometimes people slowly disconnect because they don't feel emotionally understood, even inside stable relationships. And I didn't know the difference. I thought solving problems was the same thing as emotional support. Whenever Emily talked about stress, I gave advice. Whenever she mentioned anxiety, I tried fixing it. Whenever she got quiet, I gave her space instead of curiosity. In my mind, I was being helpful. But one night changed everything. We were driving back from dinner after a small argument that honestly seemed stupid to me. She had been upset because I canceled plans earlier that week for work. I kept explaining logically why I had to. Traffic lights reflected across the windshield while she stared out the passenger window. Finally, I said something I thought was reasonable. "I don't understand why this became such a big deal." And that's when she said it. Very calmly. "That's kind of the problem. No yelling. No anger. Just exhaustion." I remember gripping the steering wheel tighter because suddenly the conversation didn't feel simple anymore. "What does that mean?" I asked. She stayed quiet for several seconds. Then she said something I still think about sometimes. "You only notice emotions after they become impossible to ignore." I didn't answer. Partly because I felt defensive. Partly because deep down, I knew she was right. That conversation bothered me for days afterward. Not because she accused me of something terrible, but because it challenged the image I had of myself. I always believed being rational made me emotionally mature. But there's a difference between being calm and being emotionally available. I started replaying small moments in my head. Times she hinted at disappointment and I minimized it. Times she needed empathy but got solutions. Times she stopped bringing things up because my responses felt practical instead of understanding. And honestly, the hardest part was realizing she never directly demanded more from me. That's what confused me for so long. She adapted instead. A lot of people misunderstand female psychology because they expect emotional needs to be communicated loudly and clearly every single time. But often, people communicate emotionally before they communicate verbally. Through tone, energy, withdrawal, shortened conversations, less excitement, smaller reactions. And if those signals repeatedly go unnoticed, eventually they stop sending them altogether. That realization hit me harder than any breakup speech could have. A month later, Emily and I sat in a small cafe near her apartment on a rainy Sunday afternoon. I had asked if we could talk honestly. For once, I wasn't trying to defend myself or explain logic. I just wanted to understand. And I remember asking her something very simple. "When did you start feeling distant from me?" She looked surprised by the question itself. Then she wrapped both hands around her coffee cup and thought quietly for a moment. "You really want to know?" "Yeah." She nodded slowly. It wasn't one moment. That answer almost frustrated me at first because I wanted a clear event. A clear mistake. Something specific I could point to. But human behavior usually doesn't work that way. She explained that over time, she stopped feeling emotionally safe bringing up small feelings because they often felt dismissed unintentionally. Not ignored maliciously. Just redirected too quickly. If she felt overwhelmed, I analyzed solutions. If she felt hurt, I explained intentions. If she felt disconnected, I defended effort. Everything became about fixing instead of understanding. And the strange part was, hearing that made me realize I had been doing the same thing to myself for years too. I treated emotions like interruptions instead of information. Even my own. That conversation changed the way I viewed relationships completely. Because I finally understood something most people realize too late. People don't emotionally disconnect the moment they stop loving you. They disconnect the moment they stop feeling emotionally seen. And that can happen quietly. Slowly. Almost invisibly. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing human behavior differently everywhere. At work. With friends. Even with my parents. People constantly reveal emotions indirectly, hoping someone understands without forcing them to fully explain. Not because they're manipulative. Because vulnerability is exhausting when it repeatedly feels misunderstood. That realization honestly made me uncomfortable. Because it meant emotional intelligence wasn't about saying the perfect thing. It was about noticing. Being present. Staying curious instead of defensive. A few months later, Emily and I eventually ended the relationship. Not dramatically. No betrayal. No screaming. Just two people realizing understanding arrived a little too late. But strangely, I don't look back at that relationship with bitterness anymore. I look back at it as the first time I truly understood how assumptions shape human connection. Before her, I assumed love was mostly about loyalty, effort, and consistency. Now I think emotional awareness matters just as much. Maybe more. Because people can sit beside you every day while quietly feeling alone. And sometimes they never fully explain it. Not because they want mystery. Not because they expect mind reading. But because after enough small moments of feeling emotionally unseen, silence starts feeling safer than honesty. That's the part nobody really teaches you. Especially as a man. You grow up thinking being dependable is enough. And yes, dependability matters. But emotional presence is different. One keeps relationships functioning. The other keeps them emotionally alive. I think about Emily sometimes when I catch myself half listening to someone now. Or when someone says, "It's fine," a little too quickly. I pay attention differently these days. Not perfectly. Just differently. Because the biggest shift wasn't learning female psychology. It was understanding human psychology. Most people don't need perfect answers. They need to feel emotionally recognized before solutions begin. And once I understood that, a lot of past experiences suddenly made sense. The strange silences. The emotional distance. The conversations that felt small, but somehow carried weight underneath them. None of it was random. It was communication happening in forms I wasn't emotionally trained to notice yet. Sometimes I wonder how many relationships slowly fade this exact way. No explosions. No villains. Just two people missing each other emotionally while technically staying together. That thought honestly stays with me more than the breakup itself. Because it changed the way I see connection now. These days, when someone talks to me about their feelings, I try not to immediately solve the problem. I try to understand the emotion first. And weirdly enough, that small change has improved almost every relationship in my life. Not because I became wiser overnight. But because people open up differently when they feel heard instead of managed. I think that's the hidden truth I learned too late. Sometimes the most important things people feel are the things they stop saying out loud. And if you only listen for words, you might miss the entire story.